one person I'm super excited about. This starts my next year of wide receiver twos, solid wide receiver twos. Um, is Christian Watson. One thing I'm excited for, which is what we kind of saw last year, is using him someone as a Debo Samuel role. I feel like if they pivot more towards the run game, which it seems like they will be, Aaron Jones, Christian Watson, AJ Dillon. Those three guys should be really solid for him. They did draft a tight end this year. We'll see how he's incorporated. So wide receiver twos. These guys, Christian Watson, I mentioned, both the Steeler players, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. If I had to pick one who I'm more high on, absolutely George Pickens. George Pickens made not one but two of the greatest catches I've ever seen last year
Yes.
with Mitch Trubisky. This year,
Yes.
him and Kenny Pickett, when Kenny Pickett came onto the scene, George Pickens and him, um, he was the one getting the most targets. By week 10, those guys had a good rapport with each other. I think if the touchdowns can come, George Pickens is going to be a good pick. Um, Mike Evans as well. Michael Pittman, kind of a risky pick. He might be below there. Hollywood Brown, not because I think he's a great receiver, but because who else are they going to throw it to?
Yeah.
Rondell Moore? No,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. Um, and then in this same tier, I have Christian Kirk because this Jaguars offense, even though Kevin Ridley's coming into the fold, there's a little bit more nerves here. Christian Kirk is getting disrespected being wide receiver 30.
That's crazy.
He's wide receiver 30 in some rankings. I'm like, I think the Jags should have a good passing attack, and he can still get a good amount of targets. He got 133 targets last year.
He was 11.
Yeah, his wide receiver 11. He was one of my sleeper picks. Maybe he doesn't get 130 targets. Maybe he gets closer to 100. Goes back to a role similar that he had in Arizona. But this is going to be one of the most prolific offenses in the league, so he'll still be productive as well. And
Yeah,
Mike will as well.
yeah, Mike will as well, and I think that's a great list, and then someone we're, neglecting on this list, mostly because he's a wide receiver too, and you may be wondering, why wasn't he tier 1 or tier 2 for us? And that's gonna be Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is one of those guys who can have those really big games. He's a running back in the backfield, but you have George Kittle on that team, which Brock Purdy loves throwing him the ball. You have Christian McCaffrey on that team. You have Brandon Ayuk, who's emerging and was a top fantasy player last year with all
Mm.
of the talent on that team and really shined. I think Debo Samuel, though, still has to shine at the top of that tier of really great number two wide receivers, as does these guys who are number two wide receivers on that team. And then the best number two on his team has to be Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle would be a number one on most teams. Him and Tyreek Hill, fastest duo. Didn't matter that they were on the same team last year. He still ate. T. Higgins, the other guy who's really solid year in and year out. So I think he's going to be a really solid too. One of the most underrated number twos. You want to know who this is? He's going to be the best player on his team because the best wide receiver and running back struggle with injuries in Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Chris Olave,
Ooh,
he is
yeah.
going to eat next year. And Derek Carr is
Mhm.
someone he can still get his receivers the ball. He's still a pretty good fantasy quarterback where you're not worried, is he going to be able to get my guy the ball? Still think he's going to be able to go out there and get it done. So he's a number one on his team, but I think he'll be a great number two wide receiver. Another guy who's a two on his team, Devontae Smith. He showed he could eat last year. And then gonna go rookie on this one. I think that Jackson Smith and Jigba is gonna
Mhm.
have a massive year this year in Seattle. And then I'll go one more number two wide receiver, and that's gonna be Jerry Judy in Denver. I think he's still someone who's going to benefit from them not really having their wide receiver situation figured out. It's him, Cortland Sutton. Unfortunately, Tim Patrick got hurt again,
Mm.
but he's still going to get a lot of targets on that team. And I think Sean Payton is going to benefit that wide receiver room as a whole tremendously this year. So, as far as the best number two wide receivers, I think those are great options.